So every single Sunday, we open up the Word of God and we preach through the Bible verse by verse, and today is no exception. And if you're joining us for the very first time, we are in a series on the book of Ruth, and here is the title of my sermon, Redeeming Risk. Okay, we're going to talk about risk a lot today. This is the title of my sermon, Redeeming Risk. And my big idea is that the greater the risk, the greater may be God's gracious reward. Okay? The greater the risk, the greater may be God's gracious reward. And today, we're looking at Ruth chapter 3, and if you're joining us today for the very first time, or if you've missed any of the last two messages, you can go and listen to both of the messages on our podcast. You can go to forwardchurchpodcast.com, and you can re-listen to the last two messages. And I want to take a few minutes to catch you up to speed of what has transpired in this story thus far, and then we're going to dive into what's happening in Ruth chapter 3. So here is where we are at. Even if you missed the first two sessions on Ruth, I'm going to catch you up to speed right now. So there was this city called Bethlehem, and the name of this city, it's translated to mean house of bread. So the word Bethlehem means house of bread. Now, the irony behind this city is that in this city that is called the house of bread, there came a famine and there was no bread, okay? It was a city of God. It was a city with godly people. And by all accounts, God was there. God's presence was upon the city, even though there was a famine there for a season. So we meet this family. These are the main characters of this story. We meet a husband, a wife, and their two sons. The husband's name is Elimelech. His wife's name is Naomi. And they have two sons named Mahlon and Chilion. And so this man, Elimelech, whose name means God is my king, being the leader of his family, he led his family out from the house of bread while there was no bread there. Even though God was there, he led his family to the country of Moab. Now, the country of Moab was a place where God's people are not supposed to go, because the territory of Moab was a place that was inhabited by people who came from an incestuous relationship of Lot and his daughters. You can look that up later during your afternoon reading after your lunch. Okay, you can Google that. That's a whole different sermon. So the place where this man led his family was not a good place to go. It was not a great place to go. Elimelech, the name of the father here in this story, he makes a tragic mistake that so often men specifically make when they choose to move their family to another place because of strictly economic opportunity. When men make these kinds of decisions for their family, not based on anything spiritual, but rather exclusively based on economic reasoning. And so Elimelech overlooked spiritual reasons. He overlooked that his family was already in the house of bread. He was already in the house of the Lord. And just because there was famine there at the time, it doesn't mean that he has to go look for bread somewhere else. But still, Elimelech made this decision for his family. And he did not think through the implications of this decision. We don't see in the text that Elimelech did any research to see if this was a good decision or not for him to move his family to this new place, which he thought would be much better. We don't see him thinking through all the implications that would surround this. And as we quickly see, this was a tragic and wrong move that he made, and he led his family into making as well. So what Elimelech did is he makes an impulsive economic decision for his family, and as we see in the story, it does not fare well for his family. After they moved to the territory of Moab, a godless place, a place where God was not, right away we see in the text in Ruth chapter 1 verse 3 that Naomi's husband Elimelech, he dies. Naomi's now a widow, and she has two sons to take care of. Soon, the sons now have no fatherly figure to guide them. Her sons, taking up after their father's erroneous and tragically foolish decisions, also make tragically foolish decisions and ungodly choices by not marrying women who love God, but they married two Moabite women who were not of God and who did not worship the real God. So 10 years goes by. These two sons took two women who were not believers to be their wives, and both of the sons, named Machlon and Chilion, they die. They die, and they die childless. So Elimelech is dead, and Machlon and Chilion are also dead. And now we have Naomi, the mother, and she has two daughters-in-law, and they are in a place that is devoid of God. Now, a word about Machlon and Chilion. Both of the names of these two sons, their names have been taken to mean sickness and destruction. So if you're thinking of like baby names, that's why nobody names their kids Machlon and Chilion. Okay? That's very normal why. And their names mean sickness and destruction. And this has been explained as symbolic of their untimely death. So as we see demonstrated here, foolish decisions beget foolish decisions. As the father does, so do the sons. So now, Naomi's a widow, her husband is dead, her two sons are dead, and she's left with two of her daughters-in-law named Orpah and Ruth, who are now also widows. So Naomi and her two daughters-in-law now come to a crossroads where they need to decide whether they will go back with Naomi to Bethlehem, where Naomi is from, or whether they will stay in the territory of Moab. What happens is Ruth ultimately chooses to be loyal to her mother-in-law Naomi and goes with her mother-in-law back to Bethlehem, back to the house of bread, whereas Orpah decides to stay back and go back to the territory of Moab to be with her people and to continue worshiping her false gods. So Naomi arrives with Ruth. They go back to Bethlehem, which, by the way, means house of bread. And when Naomi and Ruth come back to Bethlehem, Naomi comes back, and she comes back into town, and everybody in this town knew her. They knew who she was because she left a long time ago with her husband. And she tells everybody in the town, hey, I know you know that my name is Naomi, and I know that my name Naomi means pleasant one, but I don't want you to call me any more pleasant one. I want you to call me Mara. And the name Mara means bitter one. So she's like, I know you know me as Naomi, the pleasant one, but I'm not pleasant anymore because God has not dealt with me the way in which he should have, so I want you now to call me bitter. That's literally what the name Mara means. She says the way in which God has dealt with her made her very bitter. And so Naomi and Ruth, they arrive in Bethlehem just in time to realize there is a big harvest in Bethlehem. The famine that was in existence before they left, there is now a great harvest. And now, even though there is a great harvest, Naomi and Ruth, they have no money. They are destitute. They have no husbands to provide for them. They are without men to provide or protect them. And Ruth, being a hard worker, diligent in work, she possesses the most excellent character that we're going to see today. She goes out into the fields to gather grain behind the harvesters, okay? This is the Hebrew equivalent of social services, right? So Naomi has no money, her daughter-in-law Ruth has no money, and they're like, what are we going to do? Well, we need some help. And so the Hebrew social services is that you can follow people that were out in the fields harvesting grain, and you can pick up what was left over. That's the way that Ruth was going to provide for her and her mother-in-law. And so lo and behold, this incredible rom-com that we're in the middle of right now, Ruth is out in the fields, and there in the fields, she meets her knight in shining armor, right? She meets this guy on a white horse, right? This is basically a guy named Boaz, right? Even the name screams success. Like if you're thinking of a name for somebody who maybe you're going to have a boy, that's a phenomenal name. She meets this guy named Boaz, and it's incredible because the name Boaz means in him there is strength, right? So Ruth is out there. She's like, man, what am I going to do? And then there's Boaz. Ah! Like it's this incredible moment, right? And Boaz looks like this perfect husband. And she's like, maybe he can be my redeemer, right? And so they meet. They have their first lunch date, if you will. Sparks fly. And they realize that there might be some chemistry between them. but they don't really know where this will lead just yet. Has that ever happened to any of your guys' relationships before or after, maybe now? And so things just kind of sort of fizzle out, right? And like a typical guy, Boaz has a hard time closing the deal. He has a difficult time closing the deal. So now the harvest is almost over. Ruth has no idea what's going to happen, whether Boaz will pursue her or not. Ladies, have you ever been in this kind of predicament? Is he going to text me? Is he not? Yeah. Right? Come on, somebody. This is just my introduction. So what happens is Ruth and her mother-in-law, Naomi, are now left to figure out what are they going to do. They're left destitute. They don't have any men that would provide for them. There's no fathers or husbands that would guide them. They are at a very, very low point in their life. And so what happens is Naomi, being an older woman, being a wise woman, being a godly woman, she provides counsel to Ruth. Basically, this is a picture of Titus chapter 2, verses 3 and 4, where an older woman counsels a younger woman. And basically, Naomi tells Ruth to do something very risky, okay? And I want to warn you, okay, that what we're about to witness in the Bible, okay, this text is descriptive, not prescriptive, meaning that the text is explaining to us what happened, but it's like, try it at your own risk, okay? So that's why I titled this message that God redeems our risk. And so if you want to do this, go ahead, but do it at your own risk. And at the same time, you will sometimes in your life have to take a step of faith. And I want to remind you that God's hand is in our risk when we take a step of faith, and the greater the risk, the greater may be God's gracious reward. So now that everybody is caught up in the particular story of what's happening here, we have this first act that opens up where basically Naomi goes to her daughter-in-law and says, okay, let's go after Boaz. Like, this is the dude. Like this guy, you need to go after him, right? And she's like, look, barley season is about to come to a close. She's like, Ruth, like, it's either now or never. Like, let's get to it, right? And so basically Naomi hears that there's going to be this huge party because the barley season is over, the harvest season is over. There's going to be this huge party, and guess who's going to be there? Boaz. Boaz is going to be there because he's worked hard all week long, all month long, however the barley season was. And so here's what Naomi tells Ruth. Go get dressed up, go get glammed up, go get dolled up, and put yourself in front of Boaz. That's what she says, right? So modern vernacular, Naomi goes to her daughter-in-law and says, get your nails done, get your hair done, get a spray tan, like get your hair colored. She's like, the only time Boaz has ever seen you is out in the field, super sweaty, super dirty, with a ponytail. That's not attractive to men. That's what's happening here, okay? And so Naomi's like, you gotta get yourself together, girl. Get dressed up, get dolled up, and look your best. I don't know about you, but from a guy's perspective, phenomenal advice. Phenomenal advice, right? And so what's happening is, Naomi's basically telling her, get in front of Boaz, right? And so now, I know what you ladies are thinking, because ladies might say, well, I don't want to chase a guy. I don't want to be the one chasing guys. Is Naomi telling her daughter to chase dudes? No, she's not. She's not telling her daughter to chase a guy. She's telling her to get in front of a guy. That's two totally separate things, okay? Meaning that, ladies, if you are single, don't chase guys, but get in their way. So you can be impossible to be ignored. Meaning, find a godly man and get in his way. Get in his way if you're a single lady. Now, you might be wondering, well, why get in a guy's way? Because, ladies, let me let you in on a little secret. I am a man, and I've been a man all my life, and I know a bit about how men think, because I am one. Ladies, we aren't brilliant. We're not. We are not that smart. We need help, okay? It's like when Victoria sends me to the grocery store to buy things, I'm like, honey, don't get me a list, get me a big poster board with pictures on it. And then only then will I actually get what you're asking for. And what I want to say is that it doesn't matter what kind of a situation you find yourself in right now. Whether you're married, you're single, you're divorced, you're separated, it's complicated, you've had bad dates, you've had good dates, whatever situation you find yourself in, this applies to you. And so what Naomi tells Ruth is, hey, after you get dolled up, after you get glammed up, after you have your glow up, and you go to this party that Boaz is going to be at, she says to Ruth, do not make yourself known to the man until he has finished eating and drinking. Phenomenal advice. Phenomenal advice. Let the man eat, let the man drink, and then get in front of the man. Don't ever get in front of the man when he's hungry. Ladies, come on, it's very simple. The way to a man's heart is through his stomach. That's how it works. That's how simple we are. I believe this is great advice. And so, if you're here and you're single, it's better to ask advice about men from someone who has been with a man, because they probably know a thing or two about how men are. So ladies, if you're single, go to a woman who's married and say, hey, you have one of those, right? Like the husband? Like, how do they function? Like, how do they work? What works? What doesn't work? Can you give me a little bit of a lowdown, right? That's how it works. That's what Naomi's doing here. And so Naomi knows what's up. Naomi has been married. She has raised 2 boys. She has had a husband before. She knows exactly what she is talking about. I'm going to be honest with you guys. Like, when I visited Victoria, when she was living in Southern California, Victoria's my wife, when I was visiting Victoria and we were courting, I flew here to SoCal. Victoria would make me the absolute best tasting sandwiches I've ever tasted in my life. And she continues to do that. That's how she won me over. Plus, she looked so hot all the time. So ladies, the way to a man's heart is through his stomach. If some of you ladies are like, well, I don't know how to cook. There's a thing called Google. There's a thing called YouTube. Figure it out, okay? Next. So what happens is, she tells her, don't show yourself to him until he ate and until he drank. He got the chicken wings down, he had some Diet Coke, and now he's ready to go, okay? Probably a bit stronger than Diet Coke what he had, but that's a whole different sermon. So what happens is, she tells him, when he lies down, observe the place where he lies, and then go uncover his feet, lie down, and he'll tell you what to do. And she replied, all that you say, I will do. How many guys right now heard this, and we're like, okay, Naomi's telling him, hey, let him eat, let him drink, and then the woman says to the man, tell me what you want me to do, and I'll do it. I mean, if we have atheists here, they're going to become Christians right now. It's like, the Bible's talking about a woman who says to another lady, go do all this stuff and then let the dude know, do whatever you want. If I was an atheist, I'd become a Christian right now. I'm like, if this is a religion of Christianity, like, sign me up right now. Stay with me. Don't take me out of context, okay? So, meaning that, we have to understand, this is very risky counsel, right? Again, I'm trying to explain, it's a descriptive, not prescriptive. So Naomi gives her daughter-in-law very risky counsel. However, the greater the risk, the greater the reward, right? So what's going to happen? Let's keep going. Some people say, you might say that, you didn't know the Bible is this exciting, did you? So some say the advice that Naomi gave to Ruth is not sound advice. And some people might say, well, did Naomi tell Ruth to cross the line? Naomi just told Ruth to go lay at a dude's feet who drank a lot of alcohol. That's what her mom basically told her to do. Now, did Naomi cross the line? Well, some commentators say that Naomi did not tell Ruth to cross the line, and I watched another pastor who preached on this message. His name is Pastor Mark Driscoll, and his comment on this is that Naomi did not tell Ruth to cross the line, but she did tell her to dance on it vigorously. It's like, hey, don't cross the line, but kind of go as close to it as possible. So here's the thing. I want to remind everyone the following. God's people are going to have a great party. When we all get to heaven with Jesus, it's going to be a huge party. So if you've ever been to a party, maybe it wasn't a Christian party, that is just echoes of what heaven is going to be, but much better because there will be no sin there. So whenever you have a great party, even as a Christian, you are practicing for heaven. And guess who knows how to party? Boaz. He knows how to party. He's a man of excellent character. He's worked hard. Now he's partying. So we're both funeral Christians. We grieve over our sin, but we're also wedding Christians. We celebrate the good things that God has done. And I want to tell you, it's fine for Christians to party. Like, it's not a sin to party in a Christian way. So Ruth basically goes down to the threshing floor where this party is happening, and she does just as her mother-in-law has commanded her. See, what happened is an older woman gave advice to a younger woman, and the younger woman takes the advice that she was given. What a concept. Somebody with more experience gives you advice, and you actually do it, right? Easy concept to understand, but not an easy concept to put into action. Just to share from my personal life, I try to take advice from as many people as possible, especially from people that are much more ahead of me than I am in life. I remember when Victoria and I were living in Seattle, contemplating where to move to do ministry. We were in a long season of prayer, and Victoria told me, you need to call my former youth pastor. He's a godly man. He's married. He has a wife. He has kids. He's a pastor of a church. He has a godly reputation. You got to give him a call, and whatever he says, you should do, because he knows a thing or two about living life. And so I remember that night, I called this guy. I told him about my whole situation. He's like, look, sounds like you're being called into ministry. Go home tonight, go apply to a seminary in Southern California, move to California and get involved in ministry. So I'm like, sounds good. I'm going to do exactly that. Came home that night, told Victoria, hey, we're moving to California in a few months. Applied, got into seminary, and boom, here we are in Southern California. Now, why I'm telling you this is because I want to understand what is it that is so difficult for people to take advice from other people who know more than they do. This is what the Bible is teaching us here. Because I didn't know any better. And I always, whenever I meet with young men, I tell them, not out of pride, but simply out of experience, that I say, if you do exactly what I say, you'll get the results that I'm talking about. It's very simple. It's not complicated. I remember when we moved to California in a few years ago, when I was starting my own business, I remember I had a bunch of mentors. And I remember one day when I started the business from zero, I remember like I was out there pounding the pavement, about to quit, about to come home, tell Victoria I quit, I can't do this any longer. I called one of my mentors, older mentor, who was a business owner, and he told me, get back out there and keep working until you become successful. Don't stop. What did I do when I got that kind of advice? I did exactly what this older man told me, because he knew what he's talking about. So the point is, don't quit when the going gets tough. Listen to counsel. Listen to advice. This is why Proverbs 11:14 says, where there is no guidance, a people falls, but in an abundance of counselors there is safety. For lack of guidance, a nation falls, but victory is won through many advisors. And so Ruth listens to her mother's godly advice, and she goes to this party. Now we're at the center of this party, okay? This looks like a party out of heaven. It's a party without sin. It's a party without sin. And so we come here to Boaz. He's eaten and drunk, and his heart was merry, and he went to lie down at the end of the heap of grain. Now, this is what it looks like, what's happening right now, okay? After all the hard work has been done, the bonus check came in, residual income hit, direct deposit is deposited, Boaz worked really hard, his employees worked really hard. Now it's time to relax. Now it's time to party. Now it's time to relish in the spoils of your hard work. You've worked hard, you've sweated, all the labor and toil. Now you can enjoy it all. You can party, and you can thank God for all this provision. Now, ladies, again, a little bit what I want to say to you. With men, timing is everything. Timing is everything. Get the timing right. As you see, Ruth did not go to Boaz before he ate, before he drank. She didn't come to him and unload all sorts, like, hey, Boaz, like, why didn't you call me? And you left me on red, and you did all these things to me, and don't you know all these other young men really want me to, and I'm holding myself out for you? No. Ruth was chill. Ladies, men love chill girls. Men love chill chicks. Like, just be chill, be relaxed. And that's exactly what Ruth was. So she's like, okay. She came up, dolled up, glammed up, glowed up, comes to the party, walking with a limp. She's chilling. She's not acting all weird. She's just chilling, she's just hanging out. And what is she doing? Boaz over there eating? Sounds good. Keep eating, bro. Keep eating steak. Drinking a little bit? Sounds good. All right. And now, after he did all of that, his heart is now glad. His heart is now ready to receive whatever it is that's going to be asked of him. And now, I love Boaz, like a typical guy. He goes to lie down at the end of the heap of grain. Like, men will fall asleep anywhere, right? Like, I don't care where I am, I can just fall asleep. And so, here's the thing. Why is Boaz lying at the end of the heap of grain? Because he doesn't want thieves to steal his grain. He is like a dude who's like strapped, sitting at his house, making sure nobody comes in to rob him. That's what he's doing. He's like, I'm not letting these guys come from a foreign land, coming to steal my grain, coming to steal my money. Boaz is protecting his company. He's protecting his employees. He's protecting his investment. He's protecting what he has worked so hard to get. Men, pay attention. Boaz is not blowing it all on the casino or whatever other drug of choice that men might have. He's not doing that. He's sitting on this investment knowing how hard he worked. And now we see this moment. It's getting crazy. Ruth comes in softly to him and basically verse 8 says, at midnight, the man was startled and turned over, and behold, a woman laid at his feet. Like any dude would be startled. Like, I'm sure men would be excited as well, but mostly startled. It's like, imagine you're a dude and you're just sleeping and like you're single and you wake up, oh my gosh, there's like a beautiful woman right here. It's kind of weird. Like, I didn't call anybody. Did I swipe right too much last night and somebody showed up at my house? Like, what in the world happened, right? Some of you hit way too close to home. That's okay. So Boaz wakes up and he sees a woman at his feet and he's like, who are you? Who are you? Like, who the heck are you in my bed? Like, that's a really good question, right? Like, I'd ask the same question. So I want to make sure we all understand that based on all my research, okay, and I've done all my research, nothing sexual happened here between Boaz and Ruth. It could have, but it didn't, okay? This is why I want to say it's not about safe sex before marriage. It is about safe sex for marriage. Okay? Whatever situation you're in, the trajectory is what matters. The trajectory is what matters. Now, let me explain to you what happened here, and let me explain to you that the temptation that Boaz had in this particular moment. Keep in mind, the man's name Boaz, it means somebody of exceedingly great character. We're going to see here that Boaz, he had a chance to sin, but he did not, and he lived up to his name and what his name means. So look what happens. Typically what would happen is when the guys would be done with the work, getting the grain, doing the harvest, they would go to the threshing floor. There was a lot of different kinds of threshing floors that would happen, right? They'd have a few drinks, and what would typically happen is prostitutes would come to this place where they know that the men are there. They just worked hard. Maybe they're weak in how they're thinking about things, and they solicit their services. Why do the prostitutes come to the threshing floor? Because the men were there. The men just worked hard. The men had money. Okay, and this is what was happening usually here. So the question is, why Boaz is asking this question to Ruth? Why is he asking her, who are you? Boaz wakes up and he's like, who are you? And look how Ruth answers Boaz. This is her moment. This is the risk, right? Naomi told her, go and put yourself in front of Boaz. He potentially might be your husband. He's a man of great character. You're a woman of great character. It's a match. So here's how Ruth answers Boaz. She says, I am Ruth, your servant. Spread your wings over your servant, for you are a redeemer. So what Ruth here is asking Boaz is, she says, why don't you, Boaz, answer God's call and become my redeemer? Ruth is coming to Boaz and she's saying to him, be God's wing for me, love me, protect me, look after me, hold me close, come close to me. That is what Ruth is saying. And this phrase that Ruth uses, she says, spread your wings over me, meaning put your blanket over me. And in this particular context, putting your blanket over a woman was the equivalent of putting a ring on a finger. Are you guys with me? Meaning that it was a proposal for marriage. It was a proposal for marriage. Ruth essentially saying here to Boaz, I want to be your wife. I want to sleep under the same roof. I want to sleep under your blanket. I want to be the co-signer on the mortgage to our future house. I want to share the bills with you. I want this to be legally where you are my husband and I am your wife. I want you, Boaz, to take me home and have me sleep in your bed. And what Ruth here is saying, she's saying to him, I want you to marry me. Some of you might say, well, is Ruth proposing to Boaz? No, she's not proposing to Boaz. Ruth is proposing to Boaz that he should propose. She's proposing to him that he should propose. Again, remember, dudes don't get clues very easily. So sometimes a woman has to propose for the guy to propose. For us, think of us like 8-year-olds. Put the cookies in the bottom shelf. Okay? That's the only way we're going to understand it. And so I want us to understand the following. Is Ruth asking to have sex with Boaz? Because the text here says, a woman lay at his feet. Here's the thing. The language here is feet, and I do not believe that they had any sexual sin here. But does Ruth have a desire to be the wife of Boaz under his blanket? What would you guys say? Yes, she does. Now, ladies, for women, it is normal to have a desire to be married. It is normal to desire for a man to take care of you. But we believe that according to Scripture, it is a sin to have sex outside of marriage. And it's funny because often religious people say, you know, sex is like dirty, nasty, and vile, so save it for marriage for the one you love. It's like, what? No, this is what God has created. It is something holy. It is something beautiful, and it is something created to enjoy in the context of marriage. Now, I want us all to understand that all of us come from different backgrounds. We have different life situations. What matters is not what has happened in the past. What matters is what's happening now, the trajectory of your life. And so Ruth is being very honest. She's like, dude, I want to be your wife. She's not asking him to do anything inappropriate. However, she's low-key putting him on notice. Ladies, have you ever done that to a man in your life? Like, bro, like you got to figure this thing out, right? That's what she's doing. She's making her intentions known, and she's putting Boaz on notice. Now, I want you guys to notice the risks that she's taking. Next slide. I want you to notice the risks that she's taking, okay? Multiple risks being taken, okay? Number one, watch this. Again, God's hand in our risk, right? We are called by God to sometimes take risks and steps of faith. Number one, it's a woman asking a man. That's a big risk. Number two, it's a Moabite woman. Remember, she's not a Hebrew. She's a Moabite woman. She's asking a Hebrew. Number three, it's a younger person asking an older person because Ruth was younger than Boaz. Number four, it is an employee asking an employer. Meaning that, all to say, Ruth is very bold, she takes a great risk, and now we're all left to find out how will Boaz respond. Do you guys want to know what happens next? Okay, so watch this. And Boaz says to Ruth, may you be blessed by the Lord, my daughter. You have made this last kindness greater than the first, in that you have not gone after young men, whether poor or rich. Boaz, rich, successful, Not that good looking, but that's okay because he spent money, figuring out how to make money, so that's why he didn't have too much time to get a six-pack. In his bed, and a woman is right here, not just, Ruth ponytail out in the dirt. She's glammed up, dolled up. And she's like, I want you to propose to me. I want to get under your blanket. And you know what Boaz says? Sounds great. Let's have a Bible study. Did you guys catch that? Like literally, Boaz could have done anything he wanted with Ruth at that very moment. But he proposes to her a Bible study. Now, I don't know if there's any way to pump the brakes more than the way Boaz pumped the brakes, but if you want to know how to pump the brakes, it's what Boaz did here. He was like, nah, I'm good, but let's read the Bible, right? So this is what happened here. And so Boaz, instead of taking advantage of the situation, man, you got to listen to this. Instead of taking advantage of the situation or taking advantage of the woman, Boaz lives up to his name. He's a man of exceedingly great character. He's a godly man. He acts in a very godly way. Notice, Boaz, instead of trying to sleep with Ruth, he prays for her. She's like, hey, I'm pretty ready to sleep with you. Naomi kind of told me to get in this. If something goes wrong, I'll just blame my mother-in-law. And he's like, hey, let's just have a worship session right now. If this was going in the wrong direction, this is going to completely pump the brakes, right? Meaning that if you are, ladies, if you're thinking about what kind of guy you should have in your life, what kind of Boaz you're looking for, look at what Boaz did. Instead of inviting Ruth into his bed because he's a believer in God, because he understands that he will keep himself pure for marriage, because he knows how not to defile a woman or do anything inappropriate, Boaz essentially says to Ruth, hey, would you like to have a Bible study right now? Let's go read the Bible. Let's pray. Ladies, I want to tell you, when you find a man like that, put yourself in front of him and pray that he proposes to you and get married to a guy like that. That's the kind of guy you want, that loves God more than he loves you. That's what you want. You want your Boaz, okay? Now, in addition to that, not only is Boaz going to protect Ruth and not do anything inappropriate with her because he loves God, but Boaz is so humble because, watch this, he says to Ruth, he says, you have made this last kindness greater than the first in that you have not gone after young men. So in here, Boaz is basically saying, I have no idea why you would even like me because you, Ruth, are so out of my league. He's like, Ruth, you're pretty and you're beautiful, and why would you want to be with a dude like me? That's what Boaz is saying, right? Boaz thinks Ruth is completely out of his league. He says, I cannot believe, Ruth, that you would go after a guy like me. So this basically goes to tell us that Boaz isn't the best looking dude. But you know what he has that makes him even more attractive than any other man out there? He has a thing called a job. He has a thing called a job, right? It's like having a job covers up not having a six-pack. I guarantee you, any woman, men, understand. If you come to a woman and say, hey, would you like me to have rock hard abs or would you like me to have a full-time job? They'd be like, full-time job all day long. In fact, it's actually been scientifically proven, this is a whole other sermon, that women prefer a dad bod in relation to a chiseled bod. That's just a reality. So that's why often you see a bunch of dudes who are super chiseled, who are too into themselves, who can never land a girl because they are a girl unto themselves. Yeah, I said it. So look what happens. And if you've been coming to Forward Church for any length of time, we have this thing that I feel like the Lord has given to me. He's delivered to me on high. It's this thing called JJLC. Right? So ladies, if you're looking for a man, he needs to fit the JJLC criteria. Let me teach you what it is. He loves Jesus, he has a job where he knows what he's doing in a career, and he's part of a local church. Okay? JJLC. Get that tattooed on anywhere you want, okay? Ladies, if he doesn't love Jesus, if he has no idea what to do with his life, and if he's not a member of a local church, don't get into his way. Run away. Run away. He's a brokey. You don't want anything to do with this dude. He's not a Boaz. He's a broke-as. He's a lazy-as. He's a stinky, smelly-as. You want nothing to do with a guy like that. You want nothing to do with a guy like that. Get out of his way, right? And so here we are back to Boaz. He loves God. He loves people. He faithfully provides to his people. And he says to Ruth, look how humble he is. He says to her, you could have gotten any of those other good-looking guys on the threshing floor. You could have went after any one of those guys. I'm not one of those guys. So ladies, here's what I want to say. Sometimes ladies, men don't pursue you not because a man doesn't want to pursue you, but because he believes that you would never give him the time of day. Because he feels like you are so completely out of his league that you would never, ever pay attention to him. So what is the solution to that? Put yourself in front of that godly man. Put yourself in his way and see what happens. He may not think you are looking for somebody like him, but you are. So in verse 11, we see here Boaz answers Ruth, and he says to her, my daughter, do not fear. I will do for you all that you ask, for all my fellow townsmen know that you are a worthy woman. Middle of the night, Boaz could have done anything he wanted with Ruth, but he chose not to because he wants to honor her and he wants to honor God and he doesn't want to commit sin. And Boaz says to her, you know what? You want to be with me, Ruth? Done. He says to her, you know what? I'm not going to manipulate you. I'm not going to sleep with you. I will not have a 10-year engagement with you. I will not drag this thing on. I will not leave you unread. He says to her, you have nothing to fear. Trust me, and I will get this taken care of. Ladies, that's the kind of guy you want in your life, okay? And Boaz calls Ruth a worthy woman. So here is a worthy woman, right? Ruth, a godly woman. Here is a worthy man, Boaz, right? What is that? That is called equally yoked, right? That is an equal match. Ruth used to be an unbeliever. She came from the Moabites. Now she is a believer. She had a heart transformation. She before did not know God. Now she knows God. She did not come from a good family. Now she's a woman of exceedingly good character. Boaz is too. He loves God. He is equally yoked with her. They both love the Lord the same. And this is why you absolutely, when you think about marriage, you must be equally yoked. Equally yoked. This is where 2 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 14 comes along. Here's what it says. Do not be yoked together with unbelievers. For what do righteousness and wickedness have in common, or what fellowship can have light with darkness? In order for you to have a great marriage, you must be equally yoked. And equally yoked means you can stand side by side with your spouse, and you both love God, and you both can serve him together. Let me illustrate it to you. So this is my wife, Victoria. We are equally yoked. I came from a Christian family. I love the Lord. And Victoria came from a Christian family and she loves the Lord. Your story might be completely different than ours. It doesn't need to replicate our story, but the principles must. I loved God before I got married to Victoria, and Victoria loved the Lord before she got married to me. In fact, Victoria loved the Lord more than she loved me and continues to do so. I love the Lord much more than I love Victoria. When Victoria loves God more than she loves me the way a wife needs to love her husband. When I love God the way I need to love God, I love her the way that God needs to love me. And so as you can see, when we hold hands together, right, exactly, and we walk, I promise her we're not going to go down the aisle, but we're gonna walk a couple steps. If you saw, we are equally yoked and we're moving in one direction together. We are holding hands. Our principles are the same. Our thoughts are the same. We have a direction of which we're going to. And here's the thing that matters most. It is not that we wake up on Sunday morning and Victoria is like dragging my hand and saying, Bogdan, please come to church. Please read the Bible. Please pray. Please do something with our family that would be spiritual. No, she's not doing that. And neither am I saying, Victoria, today's Sunday, you have to go to church. We have to read the Bible. Oh my gosh, it's Tuesday morning. Have you not read your Bible? I'm not having to drag her. We are walking together. We're walking together. This means that we're equally yoked. Honey, thank you very much. Round of applause for Victoria. Great job. Why do I share this with you? I want to say this as lovingly and as tenderly as I can. If you are a Christian right now, if you're listening to this and you're a Christian, and you are hitched up, or if you are in a romantic relationship with somebody who is not a believer, like you are a believer, you are living in sin. And you're living under the economy of the Moabites, which is a godless economy, and not the economy of the Hebrews, which is a godly economy, meaning that God will not bless your disobedience. God will not bless your disobedience. God will not bless you if you continue living in sin. This is why we want to help you, whatever condition you find yourself in. Let's work together. Let's have a correct trajectory towards the things of God. And see, what looked like a mismatch at first, a Moabite and a Hebrew, rich or poor, is in fact, here's why they are an equal match in God's eyes. Do you know why? Because they both love God. They both love God. Ruth and Boaz are equally yoked. They both do not fall into sin. They do not fall into disobedience. They both love the Lord, and they both do the correct thing. They love God, and they have an excellent character. Now you might say, well, great. Boaz likes Ruth. Ruth likes Boaz. And now they can get married and live happily ever after, right? Nope. Every good love story, every good rom-com has what? Drama. Drama, right? See, men, if you want to be with a woman who is a worthy woman, who is a woman of exceedingly good character, you will have to overcome some sort of obstacle, okay? Men, if you need to understand that whatever it is you did to woo your current wife, you need to continue doing that. Here's why. Because if you men do not date your wife, someone else will. Someone else will. Someone else will take care of her if you're not doing that. And so the point for men is that if we want to be with a woman who is a worthy woman, who is a woman of exceedingly good character, we will have to overcome some sort of obstacle. Maybe the person you got married to, she may be in credit card debt. Maybe she has college debt. Maybe you had debt. Maybe this person's a single mom. Maybe this person has some sort of an ailment. Here's the thing, men, you're going to have to put in some work and go through a particular obstacle to get the woman you ultimately want and the one you ultimately need that God has prepared for you. This is why Ruth chapter 3 verse 12 says Boaz kind of puts like a wrinkle in this whole thing, and Ruth continuously needs to trust the Lord, and he says, now it is true I am a redeemer, yet there is a redeemer nearer than I. I don't think any lady loves to hear this yet. Right? Yet. It's like, but here's this thing. It's like, hey, I need to have a conversation with you. No. Like, what are you talking about? I did all this work. No. There needs to be a conversation. What stands in the way? I remember when, before Victoria and I were married, she lived in California, I lived in Seattle, and we had about a 2.5-year courtship, and I was in Seattle, and I remember people kept coming up to me and saying to me, well, are you afraid that someone else might begin to court Victoria and you will lose out on her? And this is what I said to those people. What God has prepared for me, no man can take away from me. What is mine, nobody can take from me. And if anybody stands in my way, you better believe it, they will not be in my way. I will get the woman of my dreams. Yeah, gloves coming off. And a couple times I needed to do that. I was like, dude, peace, bro. Like, no, I'm not chilling with this brokey, dude. Peace. I'm the Boaz Victoria's been looking for all her life. That's what's up. You can clap that up. You can clap that up. And I'm not even that cool of a person. Like, I have so many faults and flaws, but I just want to show you that women, you deserve a dude to work for you. It shouldn't, don't be super like, oh yeah, sounds good, let's do this. No, like, figure it out, right? And so this is exactly what Boaz does. He's saying, Ruth, you're great, I'm great. However, he's like, there's this other guy. There's this other guy, he has a right to the land. There's this other relative that has the rights to the land. And he's like, I might not be the guy to redeem you and marry you. So this is the point in this story where we must understand that Boaz had no legal obligation to redeem Ruth. It's not that Boaz had to do this, he wanted to do it. And he realized there was an obstacle, there was another guy. And Boaz was like, give me a challenge. I'll take care of him. That's exactly what he's saying. And so the point is that Boaz is going to be marrying Ruth not because he had to obey some law, but because he loves her. He's not obligated. He's not being forced to marry her. He wants to marry her not because he has to, but because he wants to. This is why Boaz is like Jesus. Look at John 10:18. Jesus says about giving up his life. Jesus says, no one takes it from me, but I lay it down on my own accord. A lot of commentators say, well, Boaz had to get married to Ruth because he had a legal obligation to take care of people that were destitute. No, he didn't. He didn't have to. If Boaz left right then and there, didn't want anything to do with Ruth, he didn't have to do anything. He wanted to. That's love. That's love. He wasn't obligated. In this, Boaz is like Jesus, okay, stay with me. Boaz is like Jesus, and Ruth is like the church, and Jesus loves us, not because Jesus has to, but because Jesus wants to. He's not obligated. Why does Jesus love you and me? Because he's gracious, because he's kind, because he's dependable. Because he's full of grace, not of law. Because for Jesus, it's not him fulfilling a legal requirement to love you and me. It's not out of obligation. It's not a legal transaction. And what we see here is an illustration of the gospel of love and grace. Boaz says to Ruth, I'm not legally obligated to do anything for you. Some other guy is. But I love you. I want to redeem you. I want to marry you. He says, I'm going to figure this out. So watch this. Verse 13. He's like, all right. He's like, all right, we cool. We cool. We get it. Like, I like you. You like me. Sparks are flying. Like, let's keep this flame going. Like, he's like, look, remain tonight. Just hang out, wherever you are at, like Holy Spirit distance. And in the morning, if he will redeem you, good, like this other person. But if he's not willing to redeem you, then as the Lord lives, I will redeem you. Lie down until the morning. So Boaz is being a man of exceedingly great character. And he's saying, hey, we're not going to break the law. We're not going to sleep together. Why? Because God doesn't bless sin. I want to marry you. I want to be with you. Ruth, you sleep here. Nothing inappropriate is happening. And keep in mind, Ruth at this particular moment is miles and miles away from her home. She's miles from her home. She's miles and miles away from her mother-in-law, Naomi. And there might be, if she goes home at night, in the middle of the night, keep in mind, there is a bunch of other threshing floors around with a bunch of drunk men who want prostitutes. So what Boaz is doing is he's preserving Ruth's safety. He's protecting her from all the other ungodly parties that are going on all around. It's like Boaz is like, he's like, I know this is a seedy part of town, and there's a whole ton of other dive bars, and I don't trust you with any Uber driver. It's like, I've been inside of an Uber, like Sketch Central sometimes. Nothing against Uber drivers, but so Naomi's in her home. Ruth is here. Boaz is like, look, it's dangerous for you to walk home. Don't walk home in the dark. Not only that, Boaz is like, you're glammed up, you're dolled up, going out in the middle of the night with all these threshing floor parties, not good. And he's like, also, if I'm going to be married to you, I need to start courting your mother-in-law right now. How? Oh, I woke someone up by this. How can I start courting your mother-in-law right now? Because I'm taking care of her daughter. He's taking care of her daughter immediately from the very get-go, so that the family and the mother-in-law and everybody will say, man, this guy, he's going to take care of my daughter. She will not lack anything being in his household. So what happens is, he's telling her, lay at my feet, nothing physical is happening, nothing inappropriate is happening, and he's telling her, you can go home when it is safe. I'll get the other guy out of the way, and we're going to figure out how to make things happen. And why? Because Boaz wants to be blessed by God. He doesn't want to do anything sinful. Boaz knows that God only blesses those who obey him. And so Boaz does not sleep with Ruth because Boaz knows God does not bless sin. Boaz knows that if he sleeps with Ruth before he's married to her, he breaks the law and God will not bless him. So here's what Boaz does. Watch this. Boaz trusts the providential hand of God to work in spite of these very difficult circumstances. Are you guys with me? Boaz, like, I don't fully get this. There's a lot of obstacles, but I'm going to trust the hand of God in this very difficult circumstance. Why does Boaz trust God so much? Because Boaz loves God and because he really does love Ruth. He loves her, and he really wants to marry her. And Ruth came to him and said, I really love you. Do you want to marry me? And he said, yes, I really want to marry you, but hang tight. Just wait a little bit. I need to figure some stuff out. Ladies, this is for you. Do not be too easy to get. Do not be too easy to get. Some of you say, but there's a big obstacle that a guy needs to cross before he can get married to me. Ladies, listen to me. If a man truly loves you, he will figure it out. And why would you want to be married to a man who can't figure stuff out? Nobody wants to be married to a dude who doesn't know how to figure stuff out. If the guy can't even figure out a simple obstacle to get to you, why would you want to spend the rest of your life with this guy? Leave him on the threshing floor. He's done. Wait for your Boaz. In so doing, when a man goes through multiple obstacles, I remember when I was flying to our engagement party here to Southern California from Seattle, I remember there was this huge accident on the road. I had to walk like 3 miles on the freeway to the airport because I'm like, I will not allow myself to be late to this particular flight. Literally, I was carrying on my back my tuxedo, and my tuxedo bag had holes at the bottom of it because I was dragging it on the asphalt freeway floor in order to go to California because it was an obstacle I had to get through because there's no obstacle I would not go through in order to be with my wife, Victoria. And you don't even have to clap for me. You clap for yourself because I want all of us to be like this. And so the point is, ladies, when a man has to go through a ton of obstacles to get you, what is he proving to you? He's trustworthy, he's dependable, he's very clever in the right way, and he desperately wants to be with you. There's this old euphemism or this old adage that culture says that there is 2 kinds of women. A woman you can live with and a woman you can't live without. Every man wants to marry a woman that he cannot live without. I am drawn to Victoria. I can't help myself. If you're married and you have a marriage where you're like, man, I cannot live without this person. Every woman wants that. Every woman deserves that. And Boaz here is not marrying a woman by legal obligation because he can live with her. He's marrying her out of grace because he can't live without her. Every man must choose his love, and then he must love his choice. Boaz here is going to do both. He chose his love, and he loved his choice. And so at verse 14, she did exactly that. She listened to him. She laid at his feet until the morning. She arose so that no one can recognize her. Before the sun came up, it was still dark, right? Ruth gets up in the morning, very, very early in the morning. Still dark, and look at Boaz, how he's her redeemer, how he's caring for her. He's saying to her, look, we didn't do anything wrong, we didn't sin, we didn't do anything ungodly, and I don't want anyone to think anything of that something might have happened here. Sun's coming up, go ahead and go home. Men, I just want to remind us that it's not enough to preserve a woman's chastity. You must also preserve her reputation. It's not only that Boaz did not sleep with her, but he also took care of her reputation in the town and in the city. He cared for her. This is why Ephesians 5:3 reminds us all that sexual immorality and all impurity or covetousness must not even be named among you as it is proper among the saints. There should not even be a hint of immorality, and God can rescue us, and God can redeem us, and God can forgive us of whatever current situation that you're going through. But this is a trajectory that we must go to, especially if you love her. You don't want her to have a bad reputation. You want to honor her and have her be honored by others. Verse 15, we see that not only has he protected her honor, how he preserved her safety, Boaz did, but he says to her, before she goes back to her mother-in-law, who's probably worried at this point, sick, worried, like, where are you, daughter? I'm going to come to this in a second. Boaz says to her, hey, Ruth, bring the garment you're wearing and hold it out. She held it out, and he measured out 6 measures of barley and put it on her, and she went into the city. Now, I don't know how much this weighs, but he gives her a very generous gift. He does not let her go empty-handed. He gives her a very generous gift, and he's like, look, it's the morning, go back to your mother-in-law, here's a gift you can take to your mother-in-law, let me figure this thing out. I'm not going to string you along, I'm not going to leave you unread, this is not going to be a 10-year engagement, let me figure this out. Watch this. Ruth comes home, right? Early in the morning, she comes home, and guess who's been probably up all night worrying about her daughter? Naomi, right? So Naomi's like, all the advice I gave to Ruth, it might have gone really good or it might have gone really bad, right? It's like, hey, but Naomi took that risk, right? She believed God would redeem her risk. So Ruth gets home, Naomi's been up all night worrying about her daughter, and it's a bit scary because Naomi's probably, man, should I have said it to her? Should I not have said it to her? She's thinking. And so her daughter comes home and she's like, so, spill the tea. How'd it go? Like, I want to know. And Ruth begins to tell her mom, her mother-in-law, all that this man had done for her. And not only that, she shows her the gift Boaz gave to Ruth to give to Naomi. Now, this is a very great point for us men who are either married or who desire to be married. Look at the big generous gift that Boaz gave. To whom did Boaz give this generous gift for? It was for Naomi. Meaning that Boaz began to court the mother-in-law before he was even married to Ruth. And that is a great thing to do. I can stand here honestly before God and tell you as a church that I'm so thankful to God that I have such a phenomenally good relationship with my mother-in-law, Victoria's mom. She can tell you that herself. You can go out for coffee and tell her if I'm lying or not. She'll tell you the truth. And I thank God for that my relationship with Victoria's mom is good. And do you know how good my relationship with her is? I can call her mom. I call her mom. I call her my mom. And so the point is that if you're thinking about marriage, you're not just getting married to that person, you're marrying the entire family. So think twice. Right? It'd be a good idea for you to get along and know what it is that you're marrying into. And so, men, this is the best way to court your mother-in-law. Take good care of her daughter. Take good care of her daughter. That's exactly what Boaz did even before they were married. So, men, if you're, it's like women, if the guy that you're dating is not taking care of your mom, dude, why do you think he's going to take care of you? If a man can't commit to coming to church every single Sunday, what makes you think he's going to commit to waking up in the same bed with you every single morning? Don't just think of how you can honor the woman. Think of how you can honor her mother. And those of you who are single men, I just want to tell you, like, don't you realize the level of brownie points you would get with the woman that you're pursuing if you went ahead and took her mother-in-law out to dinner? Your future wife would thank you for that. So here we go. Verse 18. This is the last verse. ladies, any guy who comes up to you and says, hey, you know what? I'm not really sure where we are at as a couple. We're going to have to date for a few years. We're going to have to figure it out. Next. You can tell him your pastor called him a brokey. You can just keep going. I'm already saving you the heartache. And gentlemen, if you're single and a woman who is godly, Jesus Job Local Church applies to men and women. If a woman comes to you and she's dolled up, glammed up, she got the glow up, she got the Holy Spirit glow, and she's like, I care for you, and I know that you're a guy, and sometimes you're a little bit, a little bit obtuse in certain things, so let me put it to you clearly. I propose to you today that you should propose to me today. Settle the matter today. Even if you can't afford a wedding ring, all you got is an onion ring like Homer Simpson. Put a ring on it. Okay? Some guys are like, well, that's a big decision. I don't know if I like commitment. I'm not sure what I to do. I feel like you're pressuring me. Man, if a lady's going to show you her heart like that, you better be careful with it. Don't string her along. You better have an end game in mind. And that's exactly what Boaz says. He's like, hey, we should get married, Ruth. And like, oh yeah, on my calendar it says today. Today looks like a good day to get married right now. That's what he says. Why wait? You found a good woman. Jesus Job Local Church. Get on with it. So Naomi, her mother-in-law, she's led by the Spirit. At first, she told, see, this is why you need to have good people who counsel you well in your life. At first, she told Ruth, hey, Ruth, don't wait. She's like, clock is ticking. Get out there. Which threshing floor are you going to go to today? But now, look what Naomi's saying to her. She's saying to her, wait. Some of you are like, man, that sounds like my mom. At first she says this, then she says this. Which one am I supposed to do? Do what she says. Naomi's saying, wait. If this man truly loves you, he's going to figure out all the obstacles and he's going to marry you. So Naomi's basically telling her daughter, let him go prove himself. You need to trust that he will figure out all the difficulties and complexities. He's a man. Men are supposed to figure things out. And that's why Naomi does not tell Ruth, well, you know what? Get your Excel spreadsheet out. Let's do a background check on this guy. Let's make sure he doesn't have a criminal record. Let's calculate all these things, whether he's a good fit for you or not. Naomi already knew that he's a good fit for her. And Naomi tells Ruth, which can be very frustrating, she's like, why don't you just sit here and rest in the sovereignty of God? Relax. She's like, if Boaz is for you, he's going to go through any obstacle to have you. If he can't figure it out, why would you want to be married to a guy who can't figure things out? Right? So this is how I want to close this message. This is how I want to close, okay? Here is the good news. Here's the good news for you and for me, whatever situation you find yourself in. Ruth risks, but ultimately she is trusting Boaz, who trusts God, whom Boaz loves very much. Are you guys with me? Ruth risks. Risk that is redeemed. This is your and my risk in the hands of a sovereign God. And all that risk means is taking a step of faith. Ruth risks it all, but she trusts this man who trusts God, whom he loves very much. And so, my friends, this story, this beautiful love story with all of its intricate characters, the greatest thing that it's trying to show to me and to you is the sovereignty and the providential hand of God, how God is interwoven throughout all these people, through the counsel of Naomi, through, though risky to be sure, through the faithfulness of Ruth, through the trustworthiness of Boaz. There's a providence of God. The providence of God, the theme of this book is this. This is for you. Don't leave without this. You have to take calculated risks. I'm not saying you make foolish decisions. That's what Elimelech did, and it ruined his family. But Ruth and Naomi took a calculated risk, and it was a big risk. And sometimes when you've done all you can, you have to take a calculated risk, trusting that God is sovereign and He will figure it out. So in this, perhaps the greatest love story in all of Scripture, this is the greatest love story ever told. The same language that is used between Ruth and Boaz is the same language that is used between God and His people. And what does this story tell us? Jesus is our greater, glorious Boaz. Jesus and His church, the same language is used for this reason. This relationship is a picture of the gospel of Jesus Christ. Ruth, like the church, the bride of Jesus, comes to Boaz as all of us come to Jesus. And what does Ruth ask? What do we ask of Jesus? Will you redeem me? Will you take care of me? And who does all the work? In this instance, Boaz does all the work. And Boaz is a picture of Jesus. Jesus is our glorious Boaz. Jesus is like Boaz, and we are like the church. And so what do? What are we called to do, you and me? We are called to go to Jesus, ask Him for redemption. And He redeems us at a great cost. More than just the money that Boaz spent. What did Jesus give? His blood. He lives, He dies, He rises. He gives us Himself as a gift. He redeems us and He enters into a relationship with us. Why would He do that? Jesus wasn't obligated. He doesn't owe us anything. That's grace and that's love. And so here's how I'm going to end this message. If you are here today and you don't know Jesus, you need to know Him. You need to get to know Him. He's the God of Ruth and Boaz, and He can be your God too. And Jesus is coming through this family line. Jesus comes from the family line of Ruth. Jesus is like Boaz. Jesus is asking us to come to Him like Ruth, asking Him to be redeemed and trust His finished work of death, burial, and resurrection. So church, I love you. I hope you're enjoying this book. And next week, we're going to be in chapter 4. And in chapter 4, I'm going to leave with a cliffhanger. There's going to be a wedding, and there's going to be a baby. So stay tuned.